At some point during 2024, Boeing delivered what may have been the last 777-300ER ever built. For many, this news went unnoticed, but for those who follow commercial aviation closely, this moment marks the end of an era. For nearly 2 decades, the 300ER version was the pillar of long-haul aviation. With the end of its production, a fundamental question arises: who can truly replace the most successful long-haul aircraft in history? The answer, at least on paper, has always been clear: the Airbus A350-1000. More efficient, more modern, more comfortable, an almost perfect replacement. And yet, it never sold as it should have. But one airline managed to see what no one else noticed, and today reaps the rewards.
Aviate has reached 20,000 subscribers passionate about aviation. Our sincere thanks for your support. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.
To understand the magnitude of what's happening now, we first need to understand what the 777-300ER represented for commercial aviation. When it entered service in 2004, the 777-300ER wasn't just another wide-body. It was Boeing's answer to a specific and growing demand: long-haul routes with high passenger density. The combination of capacity for 350 to 380 passengers in a typical 3-class configuration with a range of nearly 14,000 kilometers created operational possibilities that simply didn't exist before. The numbers tell an impressive story. Boeing delivered more than 800 units of the version 300ER over 2 decades. Emirates alone operates more than 120 aircraft. Singapore Airlines, Cathay Pacific, Air France, British Airways, practically all major long-haul operators built their strategies around this aircraft. The success wasn't accidental. The 777-300ER arrived at the perfect moment in aviation history. The 2000s and 2010s saw an unprecedented explosion of air traffic, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. Persian Gulf carriers were transforming their hubs into global connections, competing directly with traditional European connection points. Traffic between Asia and the Americas was growing exponentially. All these routes needed one thing: capacity combined with range. The 777-300ER delivered both, and it did so with GE90 engines that quickly gained a reputation for exceptional reliability. But aircraft don't last forever. The reality of commercial aviation is that an aircraft has an economic lifespan of approximately 25 to 30 years. Many of the 777-300ERs flying today are between 12 and 15 years old. Some have already exceeded that mark. This means these aircraft are entering increasingly heavy and costly maintenance cycles. The so-called D-checks, the deepest and most comprehensive inspections, can cost more than $20 million per aircraft and take the plane out of operation for months. Fuel consumption begins to weigh heavily when compared with the efficiency standards of more recent aircraft. And now, with production ended, there's no longer the option to simply buy new units of the same model. This creates a void, a gigantic space in the long-range wide-body market that needs to be filled. And theoretically, there's a perfect candidate for this. The Airbus A350-1000 was, from its conception, designed as a direct competitor to the 777-300ER, and when you analyze the technical specifications, it's hard to argue against this logic. Starting with capacity, the A350-1000 accommodates between 350 and 370 passengers in a typical 3-class configuration, essentially the same as the 300ER version. The range is even more impressive, 15,000 kilometers, surpassing Boeing's model. But it's in operational efficiency that the A350-1000 truly stands out. The aircraft consumes approximately 25% less fuel per seat than the 777-300ER. The advantages go beyond fuel economy. The A350-1000's fuselage is built primarily with advanced composite materials. This allows the cabin to be pressurized at a lower equivalent altitude, about 6,000 feet, compared to the typical 8,000 feet of aircraft with aluminum fuselages. Relative air humidity can also be maintained at higher levels without risk of corrosion. For passengers, especially on ultra-long flights, these differences are tangible. Less fatigue, less dehydration, better sleep quality. For airlines that compete strongly in the premium product, these details matter. From a technical standpoint, the A350-1000 also represents a significant advance in systems and avionics. Fully digital cockpit, state-of-the-art fly-by-wire systems, predictive maintenance through continuous data monitoring. And here's a crucial point: there's no direct competition. The only theoretical rival would be the Boeing 777-8, the smaller version of the 777X family. But the 777X program is years behind schedule, surrounded by regulatory uncertainties, and when it's finally certified, it will be a significantly heavier aircraft than originally promised. So, we have an apparently perfect scenario: a technically superior aircraft with no real contender entering a market where the dominant product has just gone out of production. The logical conclusion would be resounding commercial success, but that's not what happened. The A350-1000 has sold approximately 280 units to date. Compare that to the more than 800 units of the 777-300ER. Also compare it to the A350-900 itself, the smaller version, which has already sold more than 1,000 units. Something clearly didn't work as expected, and the answer to this mystery involves understanding not just the aircraft, but the moment when it arrived on the market, and understanding the only airline that decided to bet on it from the beginning. Qatar Airways is, by far, the largest operator of the A350-1000. With 24 aircraft in operation and dozens more in firm orders, it didn't just bet on the aircraft, it was its launch customer. This decision deserves careful examination because it reveals something fundamental about why the A350-1000 worked for Qatar while other airlines hesitated. Qatar Airways' operational strategy is built around an ultra-centralized hub model. Practically all international operations pass through Doha. This means the airline operates predominantly long and ultra-long flights. Doha to Auckland, one of the world's longest commercial routes. Doha to Sao Paulo, Doha to the US West Coast, Doha to various destinations in Asia Pacific. The A350-1000 was designed exactly for this type of operation. The extended range allows Qatar to operate these routes without technical stops, with full commercial load regardless of wind conditions. Fuel efficiency becomes even more important on ultra-long flights, where the weight of the fuel itself represents a significant percentage of the total takeoff weight. But there's a second factor equally important: Qatar Airways' product positioning. The airline competes aggressively in the premium segment. The Q-Suite business class is consistently ranked among the best in the world. Even economy class is positioned above the industry average.
For this type of strategy, passenger experience isn't just a differentiator, it's the core product. And here, the A350-1000 offers concrete advantages. The cabin is much quieter than that of aircraft with aluminum fuselages. The improved pressurization, as mentioned earlier, reduces fatigue on long flights. LED lighting systems allow more effective simulations of circadian cycles. On a 14 or 15-hour flight, these differences cease to be marginal and become significant. There's also a third element that's often underestimated. Qatar Airways has no emotional attachment to specific manufacturers. The airline operates both Airbus and Boeing in its fleet. Acquisition decisions are, to a large extent, based on technical merit and fit with operational strategy. This contrasts with many other major operators who, for historical, infrastructure, or even cultural reasons, have ingrained preferences for one manufacturer or another. When the A350-1000 was offered, Qatar Airways evaluated whether the aircraft met their specific needs. The answer was positive, so they bought. And when initial problems arose with the Trent XWB-97 engines, and they did arise, Qatar worked with Rolls-Royce to resolve them instead of abandoning the program. This pragmatic approach allowed Qatar to capture the advantages of being the first major operator. They defined operational best practices. They trained their teams without the pressure of simultaneously maintaining different types. They built deep expertise in the aircraft. And, perhaps most importantly, they secured priority delivery slots. While other airlines observed and waited, Qatar was accumulating flight hours, operational data, practical experience. Now, with the 777-300ER going out of production and the market finally turning to the A350-1000, Qatar is years ahead. But this still doesn't fully explain why the rest of the industry took so long. To understand this, we need to look at the real obstacles that kept other airlines at a distance. The market's resistance to the A350-1000 wasn't irrational. There were concrete reasons. The first obstacle was fundamentally a matter of timing. The A350-1000 entered commercial service in 2018. At that time, the vast majority of 777-300ERs in operation around the world were still relatively young aircraft. Many were less than 10 years since delivery. Some were even newer. In commercial aviation, replacing an asset that still has significant remaining useful life is an extremely difficult decision to justify financially. A wide-body aircraft represents an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars. Even with financing, capital costs need to be amortized over many years. When you have 777-300ERs that will still operate economically for another decade, the proposition of replacing them with A350-1000s, however efficient they may be, faces a formidable barrier. Fuel savings need to be substantial enough not only to cover lower operating costs, but also to justify capital invested prematurely. For most airlines, this equation simply didn't add up in 2018 or 2019. The second obstacle was technical, and specifically involved the engines. The A350-1000 is equipped with the Rolls-Royce Trent XWB-97, a higher thrust variant of the engine that equips the 900 version. And here, the problems began. Operators, particularly those in hot desert environments like the Persian Gulf, began reporting premature wear of internal engine components. High-pressure blades were degrading faster than expected. Intervals between maintenance were being reduced. Rolls-Royce worked to resolve these issues, introducing redesigned components and modifications to operational procedures, but the damage to reputation was already done. The third obstacle was perhaps the most subtle, but no less important: structural loyalty in transition costs. Many of the major 777-300ER operators built complete operational infrastructures around Boeing products. Pilot training is type-specific. Maintenance technicians are certified for specific manufacturers and models. Tooling, spare parts, supplier relationships, all of this is investment in a specific ecosystem. Migrating from Boeing to Airbus isn't simply a matter of buying different aircraft. It's an infrastructure transformation that can take years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars in auxiliary investments. These three factors, economic timing, engine reliability issues, and structural transition costs, created a barrier to general adoption of the A350-1000. But contexts change, and when multiple factors align simultaneously, changes that seemed impossible suddenly become inevitable. We're now in 2026, and the context that kept the market away from the A350-1000 has changed.
The timing resolved itself with the passage of time. Those 777-300ERs that were too young to replace in 2018 now have 15, 16, 17 years of operation. Rolls-Royce has made important progress in the reliability and durability of the Trent XWB-97. Redesigned components, extended maintenance intervals, better performance in extreme conditions, the problems that haunted early iterations of the engine have been largely resolved. More importantly, there are now years of operational data demonstrating this improvement. Another factor was Boeing losing an extraordinary amount of trust capital in recent years. The MAX crises, ongoing delays in the 777X program, all of this eroded the certainty that many airlines had that Boeing would eventually deliver the solution they were waiting for. The 777X, which should have entered service in 2020, won't be certified before 2027 or 2028 in the best-case scenario. For airlines that had been postponing fleet decisions, waiting for the next big Boeing product, the wait became unsustainable. These factors, converging simultaneously, are creating a remarkable transformation.
Airlines that would never seriously consider the A350-1000 are now not only evaluating, but actively negotiating. Singapore Airlines, one of the world's most sophisticated operators and traditionally a major Boeing customer for widebodies, is expanding its A350 orders. Lufthansa Group is evaluating options. Philippine Airlines and China Airlines are in talks, and there's one name the entire industry is watching with particular attention: Emirates. Emirates operates the world's largest 777 fleet, more than 130 777-300ER aircraft, plus quite significant orders for the 777X. If Emirates decides to complement or even partially replace its orders with A350-1000s, the signal to the rest of the market would be impossible to ignore. When we look at the history of the A350-1000 with the benefit of perspective, a pattern becomes clear. This isn't a case of a flawed product that the market wisely rejected, nor is it a case of inadequate marketing or wrong positioning by Airbus. The A350-1000 is, in technical and operational terms, exactly what was promised: a superior replacement for the 777-300ER. What happened was something more subtle and, in a way, more interesting. The A350-1000 arrived before the context was ready to receive it. The exception was Qatar Airways, and here's the crucial insight. Qatar wasn't lucky or made an irrational bet. They made a cold, strategic evaluation of their specific operational needs and concluded that the A350-1000 met those needs better than any available alternative. They absorbed the risks of being the launch customer because the benefits, operational, economic, competitive, justified those risks within the context of their specific strategy. 7 years later, the rest of the industry has finally reached the point where Qatar was in 2018. Fleets have aged, maintenance costs have escalated, Boeing stumbled, engines matured, the pressure for efficiency became inescapable. What seemed to be a solitary and possibly hasty bet now reveals itself as long-term strategic vision. Qatar Airways didn't bet too early. The rest of the industry just took too long to understand what they already knew.